Hello.
Hi. Is anybody there? Yeah. I guess we're live.
I guess so. I don't know if anyone is here though.
Oh yeah, look.
Oh.
7 people watching. Hey! Hi.
Oh, hi. Hi, pals. Okay. This is happening. How exciting. Welcome to Cuplet TV, and thanks to Claire so much for inviting us to do this.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's an honour to be here and to be the first readers beamed into this TV series. Yeah, I guess we should introduce ourselves.
Thanks for the shout out, Aiden Rolf.
What did you say?
So profesh.
We are actually quite profesh.
Very profesh.
We should introduce ourselves.
Yes. So many pals popping up in this stream. It's very exciting.
My name is Astrid Lorange.
Andrew Brooks.
And we're going to do a very quick introduction, and then I'm going to sit out of the camera's purview, and Brooks is going to read for about 20-25 minutes, and then I'm going to read, and then at the end, if we have time, we might do a little joint reading, and then we're going to open it to questions.
Yeah. If you have questions as we go,
yeah, note them down.
Pop them in the chat.
Pop them in the chat. Oh no, they might get lost. Hold off, and we'll call for questions at the end. And Claire's already sent through a few that we'll start with. Some good important questions about snacking in lockdown, etc.
To start, we want to, of course, acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that we're broadcasting from, the Wangal people of the Eora Nation, and we want to also acknowledge that the sovereignty of this land was never ceded to the British Crown, that it was taken by theft and violently so, and we want to acknowledge the great resistances that are continuously fought against that colonial order.
And also to say that the situation we're in right now is really, really bearing witness pretty heavily and intensely to all of the really fucked up bits of racial capitalism. So now's your time while you're in ISO to get organising, get talking, and start to plan a better future.
Yeah.
Cool. So poetry.
Yes.
Brooks, why don't you start? I'll scoot over, and I'll see you in 20 or so minutes.
Okay, sounds good. So again, thank you so much to Claire. I'm going to get comfortable. Thank you so much to Claire for organising this. It's so nice to be able to do these kinds of things in the crazy, in amongst the crazy times we're living through at the moment. Cool. I'm going to read a poem. Well, actually, it's kind of three. It's 3 poems that are part of an ongoing project that is kind of a very loose gestural translation of the Inferno, Dante's Inferno. So I'll get started. The first one is called Help Up, and it has an epigraph from Dante. And I was therefore drawn from hell's wide throat. Today is humid as fuck, one of those soupy days that comes right at the end of summer, where you just sweat in all of your skin folds despite actively trying to not exert yourself. This is my favorite time of year because it feels like everyone and everything is about to explode. I have been listening obsessively to GTFO by Mariah Carey. Astrid says the song sounds like Mimi doing a cover of the Cocteau Twins doing a cover of Beyonce's Irreplaceable, a dream pop takedown of the cheating boy. Synths float over a stripped back slow groove, and Mimi sings with a sugary sweetness. It's the sonic equivalent of huffing ammo. I love songs that feel like they're all atmosphere, GTFO feels like this, but is actually a song about refusing attachments we are pulled to, even when we don't want to be. My boss is an art toast scholar. His introduction to an edited collection on the French avant-gardist is called A Beginner's Guide to Cruelty. He writes, Artaud uses terms like plague, cruelty, athleticism, appetite for life, which indicate the urgency and energy he brought to his writing and sought from his subjects. My boss seems to have interpreted the theatre of cruelty as a blueprint for management. I dreamt about a pup drinking milk from a bitch. The milk was thick and viscous, and the pup drank so urgently it kept choking as it drank. I read that dreaming of milk symbolises maternal instincts and kindness and purity, but to dream of drinking the milk of a dog is a bad omen, a prophecy of terror to come. A few days after the dream, I spent the morning looking at Dante's plan of hell and inferno. In the third circle, where the gluttonous gather an endless and putrid icy rain falls, Dante. In the third circle, where the gluttonous gather an endless and putrid icy rain falls, Dante encounters the pup of hell, Cerberus, who flays the souls of the damned with a vigour and appetite that could only come from having 3 heads. Dante writes, Cerberus, weird and monstrously cruel, barks from his triple throats in cur-like yowls over the heads of those who lie there drowned. I had to look up the meaning of cur and found that it refers to the lowest class of dog, a nameless outclass, a mixed breed, a bitzer. I read the third circle as a brutal revenge fantasy in which the revolutionary Cerberus rises up against the treachery of a white supremacist ruling class. My manager is only 39 years old, but he is starting to waste away since he took on the role. He wears a crisp white button-up shirt to work every day, which makes him look like a well-dressed scarecrow. He writes me an email. Hi Andrew, I understand that you may still have questions about the casual pay rate. His email follows a communique to sessional staff that our pay has been cut by 39% this year. I'm trying hard to think of a polite way to ask by way of reply. Why are you such a fucking scab? The poet Marie Buck tweets about the 1994 live-action Flintstones movie, and I procrastinate writing back to my manager by watching it. It's a cautionary tale about the dangers of unvetted class aspiration and the horrors of becoming a boss. And it really is one of the more depressing films I've seen. In the movie, Fred Flintstone and Barney Rubble are 2 working-class besties who labour by day in a quarry and share their lives and resources with a kind of proto-communistic spirit. They go bowling together, crush tinnies together, and generally look out for each other. The start of their problems comes in the form of a loan that Fred gives to Barney. Bound by a capitalist conception of debt, Barney vows to repay Fred at all costs and does so by getting Fred a promotion to the newly created position of Vice President of Slate International, a company at which they both work. Kyle MacLachlan plays the evil boss that manipulates the simple-minded Flintstone into selling out his comrades in return for access to the finest material trappings. In the meantime, Barney loses his job and falls into a series of precarious employment situations that see him and his family slide further and further into a state of poverty. MacLachlan does a fine enough job playing the villain, and in the end, Flintstone exposes him, remembering his working-class roots in the process. Economic order and class relations are restored, but the casualty is the promise that Barney and Fred's friendship once held. Astrid and I make a list of snacks: bread and oil, rice, beans, tea, flour, water, butter or cream, pickled or brined, dried, cured, fermented, bottled. Lenny comes over with a bag of grapes and we gossip about poets and unions of Brazilian jiu-jitsu. She tells me she's trying to channel her work ambitions into organising the workplace. This too is my desire. More than one is a conspiracy, and conspiring can feel so fucking good sometimes. Like there's a certain ecstatic lightheadedness that comes from dining on recycled air, the erotics of breathing each other in. I've been thinking about the section in Inferno where Dante and Virgil first enter the Vestibule of Hell. It's a chaotic scene where a bunch of souls, naked and exposed and destined to remain forever unclassified on the banks of hell, chase after an elusive banner that flaps in the breeze, always just out of grasp. Wasps, hornets, and various other insects savage these futile souls, and their blood, pus, and tears mix together to form lines that run down to the ground for the maggots and worms to feast on. Hell is teeming with life. Like the worms are having this wonderful, orgiastic feast. Melik sends me a text, a passage from Calvino. The inferno of the living is not something that will be, if there is one. It is what is already here. The inferno where we live every day, what we form by being together. There are two ways to escape suffering it. The first is easy for many. Accept the inferno and become such a part of it that you can no longer see it. The second is risky and demands constant vigilance and apprehension. Seek and learn to organize who and what in the midst of the inferno are not inferno, and make them endure, give them space. This is a recipe for friendship and solidarity, but the latter must also allow for rage and refusal. Later, Miller comes over with fancy crackers covered in nigella seeds and a vine of currants. He, Astrid, and Vinny and I sit in the backyard, and the three of us get drunk on wine and eat manchego cheese and hummus on fancy crackers, while two pups, one a dingo Celtic cross and one a human, exchange embraces. It feels like we're in some kind of new age pastoral, and I'm overcome with love. That's the end of the first part of this poem in 3 parts so far. Okay, the next one is called Tattini Toast, which is a great pandemic snack as well. And it has an epigraph from Suzanne Césaire. And I am also thinking of tomorrow. Tahini and banana on toast is really one of the great breakfast combinations. Astrid says tahini is her dessert. Astrid said tahini is her desert island ingredient. The one thing she ate for the rest of her life, she had to choose one thing. I'm not sure I'd go that far, but it's a pretty sublime breakfast spread. The sky is thick with smoke today, and tiny particles of ash are falling from the sky. Everyone says it's so apocalyptic. I made a playlist on the way to work called Sesame Seeds. I put Collide by Tiana Major 9 and Earth Gang on it, and then added Jesse Norman singing this aria from Purcell's Dido and Aeneas called Thy Hand, Belinda, When I Am Laid in Earth. I couldn't think of what else to add, so I just listened to those 2 songs on repeat. It was a big mood. In the 3rd canto of the Divine Comedy, Dante reaches the threshold of the Inferno. Standing on the bank of the Upper River, overwhelmed by the incessant noise of the swarms of sinners, he encounters the famous inscription above the gates of hell. Only those elements time cannot wear were made before me, and beyond time I stand. Beyond all, abandon all hope, ye who enter here. Everyone says these are dark times. Every day we wake more exhausted to sell our labour in order to endure our lives. Each day we wake still inside history of taking. Each day we wake to the uneven distribution of death. Each day we wake to fire still raging. Each day we wake under the sign of the commodity. Each day we wake to the rule of law. And yet I am not yet ready to abandon all hope. In Collide, Tiana Major 9 sings, and I don't care about the future or the past. The idea that time stands still in the moment one attains the object of their desire is a classic refrain of the love song. It's not that past and future become irrelevant, but rather that in the moment of collision, one willingly accepts that they are no longer a singular being, and perhaps time blurs. To be beyond time is not to be outside of history, but to intuit the existence of an outside and realize the desire to inhabit it. I can taste smoke in the back of my throat and my eyes begin to itch. I can't help but think of Dante moving through the plain of burning sand upon which great flakes of fire eternally rain down in the 3rd ring of the 7th circle of the Inferno. This is the hell of fire and brimstone, where those who are violent against God and nature and art are tormented incessantly. Everything here seems to happen in slow motion, which makes it all so much more excruciating. Here, now, the inferno rages as a long history of dispossession, extraction, and violence. Jessie Norman is sublime. When she sings Dido's lament, her voice is both so full of light and dark, pain and resilience. It's so fucked up. Dido and Aeneas tells the story of the Trojan warrior and the widowed queen of Carthage, whose lives collide after Aeneas's ship is blown off course by the gods and wrecked on the North African coast. They fall madly in love and a passionate love affair ensues. But despite the depth of feeling, Aeneas and his crew eventually depart Carthage without Dido. Broken by the betrayal, Dido sets fire to a massive pyre, and as it burns, she sings the lament before stabbing herself with a sword she had given Aeneas as a token of her love. But death invades me. Death is now a welcome guest. Both Collide and Thy Hand, Belinda, When I Am Laid in Earth are songs with no structural shift between the sections. Both are built on a single loop, with melodies stretched across the ground that repeats endlessly beneath them. I think this is partly why it feels like time is suspended, pulled almost to the point of breaking. I remember falling in love. We collect scraps of resistance and store them in our pockets and under our tongues and rolled up between our toes. We lie beside each other, our bodies a soft hum. We make a brine and leave jars of fermenting veggie scraps everywhere. We shrink down in search of an escape route, accrue a debt we will never pay. Dante's journey into hell is a descent through the sins of passion to the worst sins of reason. Reason is still responsible for so much violence. Jordy Rosenberg says, the Enlightenment is the largest lie that's ever been told, and we are still living under its fabrications. Astrid tells me her dreams when we wake up in the morning. Lately, I've been unable to remember my own dreams, so I try to hold tight to hers, cherishing her bent desires, sharing in her terrors. For the exhausted, dreams do not necessarily provide respite from the creeping terror of capital, but perhaps contain another way to the outside, a future wild and tender and forceful. Okay, one more. But I'm going to get some more wine first. Virtual cheers to you. So this last poem in this series is called Salt, and I will read it now. It has an epigraph from Karl Marx. The bureaucracy is a circle from which no one can escape. Its hierarchy is a hierarchy of knowledge. Diane de Prima says, store food. Dry stuff like beans stores best, goes farthest. Salt, very important. It's health and energy, healing too. Keep a couple of pounds, sea salt around, because we're spoiled, some tins, tuna, etc. to keep up morale. I prepare cabbage while waiting for an email from HR. I wring the excess liquid from the leaves and lick the salty brine from my fingers, coat the cabbage in chili mixture and pack it down with weights. A few days later, it slowly starts to bubble and ferment. The email from HR announces that a new process has been developed to provide greater transparency for our casual academic staff, both future and current. The room is abuzz with a soft panic. I fill in forms and prepare responses to a series of questions nobody will read. While I wait, I read a poem by Saidiya Hartman called The Plot of Her Undoing. The poem is a list of dispositions and impositions that make the world in the shape of a togetherness we might not have consented to. The her of the poem is a collective figure, an historical accumulation of violences inflicted and resistances forged. Hartman reminds us that her undoing is that which underpins the order of things. A metallic taste lingers in my mouth and it makes me think of Marx, who says, capital comes dripping from head to foot from every pore with blood and dirt. The committee assembles in a boardroom. There is a platter of fruit, some rock melon and halved strawberries, grapes, a few orange wedges, honeydew, a small plate of institutional cupcakes with edible logos for icing. Tea and coffee are provided. The committee talks about diversity and inclusion. We have 1 hour. HR sends hourly email updates on the travel ban, little policy missives that anxiously fret about lost capital. Dear staff, please be advised that the current situation is a travel restriction rather than a travel ban, and update your communications accordingly. More updates follow, a constant shift to the ground beneath. At the meeting, we pass a motion and everyone cheers. Then we remember that union density is so low that the motion isn't binding. Someone says, for now, we'll have to ask our bosses if we want to go on strike. I see my manager and he asks me how I am. I say, fine, how are you? And he says, good. He's dripping with blood and dirt. Tim calls to tell me I've been blacklisted by management. We huddle at the eaves while it rains hard and you whisper something in my ear and it feels so good and I want to stay here a little longer, but we have to make a run for it. The pavement is cracked and slippery, so we take little half steps in a bid not to lose control of our own bodies. Later, I go to the gym and lift small weights above my head. I'm very weak, so I put the weights down and just lift my arms above my head in time with my slow, deliberate breaths. I look ridiculous, but it's a good way to pass the time. We cram into a small, dank room and take our places on the carpet among the papers and the trash. Slowly, we start to take apart an IKEA bookshelf, making stacks of chipped and warped MDF panels. We make a plan even though we know it's futile, and then we get drunk. On the way home, I think about the fate of the hypocrites in Dante's Hell who are defeated and worn down by having to journey while wearing robes of lead that cloak their eyes. I worry that this too will be my fate. J-Clo visits and we go to the beach and eat Thai and talk about MIA. At his talk the next day, he says it's as simple and as difficult as finding a way to block all the routes they use. I read Hartman on the train on my way to work. She argues that we must mistranslate the concept of the general strike so as not to forget those battles waged in the realm of social reproduction, the resistances of those who fail to be recognised by the category of the worker, struggles large and small. When I get home, I put on a pot of lentils, adding salt and a dried chili and a bay leaf and a clove of garlic and some peppercorns to the pot. We bump into Bianca and Grace outside Charlie's show. Inside, a sheer yellow curtain divides the room in two. It's a delicate threshold that feels good to pass through. The work is small and slow and kind of sexy. We sit on the floor of the gallery and have a makeshift picnic. When we go, we leave a few pepitas on the floor as an offering. While we wait, I think about this line by Moten. Communism is how you get nasty with enjoyment. Later we go dancing, and afterwards I try to hold on to the warmth of our collective body. Thank you so much. That is it. So thank you so much for listening, for tuning in. Stick around because Astrid is, I'm going to get out of the way and kick it over to Astrid. See you later. Thank you.
Thanks, Brooks, for that wonderful reading. Great to hear all three poems at once. I'm going to read two poems from this book, Labour, which just got published by Cordite Books. I saw Kent joined earlier, so hi Kent. Thanks so much for publishing this book, and I'm sorry that we couldn't get to Melbourne last weekend to launch it, but hopefully one day we'll get down there. And in the meantime, here's two poems from it. I'll start with Toast for Friendship and end with the title poem, Labour. So Toast for Friendship begins with an epigraph from Gertrude Stein. Before the flowers of friendship faded, friendship faded. Brooks is taking photos of me from behind the computer. CIA officials send typewritten notes around like germs, thanking each other for well wishes in advance of a difficult job. It will be a difficult job, but with your friendship and support, it will be easy to remember that it is a job that must be done. For the CIA, a friend is a patriot. One friend's love, a pledge, or a kiss. Civic friendship makes a note for every occasion, citing wives as proof of life. CIA officials fly in and out of the nearby Friendship Airport, a thin Baltimore bunker, named for Truman, the original CIA friend. The CIA wants to know fake friends from real. An example, patriots who wish well are friends, and communists who wish ill are fake friends. For the CIA, friendship splits the world clean. You can be paranoid about friends to the extent that friendship becomes a straight economy of fear. An example, CIA records show Soviet friendship as a universal threat. At the same time, the CIA writes Soviet friendship as a ruse, a cunning fraud. Soviet friendship is proving a hard sell, says the CIA, showing its terror to be a neat example of denial. Some friends are communists. Anti-communist Russians, says the CIA, should make friends with good Americans, for they deserve the friendship of the free. Patriots, says the CIA, should be wary of poetry. It can be revolutionary, but not even feel like it. We shape the sound with our great mouth and body. We imagine the continuous puckering sphincters that hold us together, rewritten, sentimental, hanging on a wine. We spread a meal with the handsome hock of our hands, bread the shape of the palm, jam the weight of the palm, candied peels and pats. Our spot is unassimilable, spooky. Sit your friend down. There's a critique to it, soft, like a sandwich. You hold your friend at the chest or by the throat, but gently. Your friend, sliding upwards wetly over the high notes. Your friend knows how to grieve like it's a gift to the group. Sit your friend down or let them lean on a door. Your friend, both an object and a space, the neck of a bottle or a passage of fine hairs inside the body. The CIA is a neat shot for officers and spouses. Betrayal as iconic as a kickback, that canny bump on. Kissing the cheeks, lifting a hand to the top of the shoulder, holding an arm around the body, pointing and shaking the head, smiling, mouthing, you. We greet, link up, pat each other on the arse, smiling, mouthing, yes. They translated the word, but it was wrong. We put it in our mouths and couldn't chew. We ran our tongues over the edges of it and bled. We held it in our pockets, hoping it would soften to the shape of our leg. It was wrong, though the thought remained perfect. None of the gestures were mine, just learned by habit. 1, self-surveillance. 2, self-loathing. I squabbled at my image. I watched as though streaming my future. I am small, bleak, cheap as a pixel. I'm a feed, definitely. I'm watching myself do everything in reverse, her vocab in my mouth and at a different pitch. I'm an absolute feed, carrying on for the drama. The CIA believes in abstraction, its sets and contracts. An office of spouses, cousins and army mates jotting down the future of national participation. First, get into art. Second, get cute. As the notes reveal, a wife is as good as a spy. Both are lateral plugins, secret languages. But wives are not always friends. An agent must consider that their wife may be a communist, and so a spy of the dangerous kind. An agent must consider that the breezy summertime barbecues and complicated gift syndicates between infant children may be part of an elaborate plot to destroy the country, its leaders, its most sacred and secret beliefs. Straining against the history of it, I stick a finger in my ear. I hear the world in half. There's a long, washy drone that's my closed ears loop. The other ear does a full-on stretch to figure a stereo. It's afternoon. I am in a literal sea of friends. The roads are blocked by buses, skidded into an empty hash. I am listening for the cops but cannot hear them, cannot hear chewing gum or the foul whistle of their pants. I root around in my pockets. I find a dozen sandwiches, warm because of my body. The CIA falters in its taxonomy. Friendship is euphemistic for communism or for its sympathies. But friendship is synonymous also with communism's great threat, zealous patriots and their codes of liberal feeling, rage, entitlement, possessiveness, envy. Friendship is both the crisis and the tactic of intelligent operations. Silvia Federici writes that as relationships between women became increasingly demonized, believed to be subversive of the alliance between a man and his wife, the word gossip, otherwise another word for friend, was rerouted to signify the cheap, trivial, toxic and damaging chatter of women. Reducing friendship to idle talk makes friendship a lie we make through speech when we have nothing else to say. Of course, for the CIA, a real friend can only be another agent. Friends on the outside must never know the truth, so friends on the inside become singular, truth-bearing documents of an intimacy predicated on the same perversities, fantasies, death wishes, and erotic attachments, the same brand of moral certainty, the same idea of duty or diligence. In the outside world, a friend is a civilian kept at arm's length, ushered out of the house and onto the lawn. CIA literature describes it like this: your friend on the inside is your cheerleader, psychologist, whoever you need in a moment. Your friend on the inside sits thigh to thigh, their hand guiding your hand on the mouse, the cursor flickering. As much as we hate to admit it, philosophy often reads like declassified notes between CIA agents, chainmailish, overly fraternal, perverse, technical. Philosophers pang with the trouble of a friend. Can we say that a friend is possible or true? One philosopher inverts another, turning friend to enemy as if to show the act of reversal as an achievement in itself. A philosopher is liable to suspect that, when tested, a friend will collapse into nothingness, will be revealed to have been one's own pathetic mirror fantasy or one's melancholy given generic form. A philosopher is likely to ask what poets do with friends, in the poetry, that is, that philosophers read. There you find the friend to be a cruel dyad, half bosom, half weapon. The philosopher learns from poetry that a friend must be called to as if calling to the moon or the dead, romantic, yet de-eroticized. I hold my glass high for a toast. Of course, the room is empty. I toast to that. A friend can become a lover and then back to a friend, or not. Two hands cupped to hold tight, I yield like a dream into a patty. Tablet. I've been in this room before, backlit by little half-chewed trinkets. One friend has the body of another. One is a sublime huffaballs of a nightlife or afterlife. All friends are symbols in their bending logic, flipping like thumbnails. One is death or the libido fully dissociating. One is the father as he looks back from a window, half waving as if half accusing, his face obscure and his speech one long note pitched like straight panic. Spread out, my fingers are linked, but never find their objects. You, hang on. Little wine sip. Okay, that was Toast for Friendship. And now to finish, I'll read the title poem from this book, Labour, which begins with an epigraph. Yeah, I'll read it. Why not? We're all in for the long haul, aren't we here? This is from Geordie Rosenberg, the fantastic essay, The Daddy Dialectic. There is simply no getting rid of the phantasmagoric power of the commodity, not in the world and not in thought, unless the conditions that make it so are changed and collectively. And we know this because the entire text of Capital is arranged around the point at which thought falters, desire, the fetish. There is a promise lying in the shoals of despair, a thought that gets swallowed in the phantasmagoria of the world as it is, a thought that is not yet thinkable. And this poem goes out for Vinny, who's deep asleep. This poem began as a joke, or at least as the response to a joke. People asked, will you write a birth poem? Or else said, please tell me that you will not write a birth poem. They asked the former while assuming that, as a poet, the birth of my baby would be prime material. They said the latter while assuming that, as a poet, I would agree that birth poems are always indulgent or boring or abject or sentimental. At first I answered both the question and the appeal with an odd half apology. Don't worry, no. I was sorry that anyone would imagine either my birth or my poetry. A feeling of embarrassment was replaced by the shame of having been embarrassed, which in turn was replaced by desire. I won't write a birth poem, I thought, but a poem about labour. A poem about how for days I laboured, at first feeling quiet and proud, as if by beginning I had more or less finished. How when the contractions intensified, I started to visualise them as a series of distinct rooms, picturing each as a space I had to cross from one door to another, the rooms getting larger and more ornately decorated as the pain became more massive. I imagined colours and objects and atmospheres and eventually people. I imagined brief conversations and embraces and then confessions and apologies. The rooms were labyrinthine by the end, with walls painted increasingly subtle and obscure shades which I was obliged to describe to myself in detail. A poem about how at the hospital I worked myself into a trance by focusing on these visualizations, how it felt like being pinned by the air, flat out on a bed, cemented to a chair. About how after I emerged from this strange state, I entered a deeply unpleasant stage in which I paced and squatted and leaned and fell forward with each wave, observing with a perverse and studious fascination the pain extending, its edges moving with an awful speed. Or the next phase, in which I sat under the shower stream, or the one after that, straddling the toilet seat, or having my waters broken with a long, horrifying hook, and then lying in the wetness, suddenly inside my own sack. A poem in which the midwife finished her shift and another one arrived accompanied by a student. The bath was filled and then emptied, and a small plastic crib on wheels appeared, and a student politely asked if I'd move my bowels, and I was nervous I wouldn't be able to, but I did, and then she scooped it away as if emptying a litter box, and then asked if I might do it again. It seemed more impossible than birthing a baby, but I tried, and I succeeded, and she was happy, and I was ready to push, and they told me that I wasn't pushing nearly hard enough, so I pushed again, and they told me to stop and wait, but I couldn't, and so I pushed as if trying to shoulder through a brick wall or fall through the earth, and my baby came out. In this poem, the labour never quite finishes. After the baby, another contraction came, and with it the placenta, and then a rush of blood and some panic. Part of the thing had been left behind. Retained product is the phrasing. A surgeon appeared and pushed on top of me, a kind of external contraction. A clot flew out, and then another rush of blood, then a drip, and some enormous lubricated suppositories were inserted into me, and then 2 people stitched me in 4 places, and it sounded so quick and mechanical that I asked if they were using a sewing machine. I sucked on gas and held my tiny baby, hot and sticky, a bloody salamander. The labour never finishes. It transforms, orients itself towards new objects. In this sense, it also never quite begins, for there was always an earlier labour that preceded. Before the labour of birth, the considerable labour of pregnancy, and before that, the labour of menstruation, the often unbearable labours of sexuality and gender, the labour of a body in wellness, and the terrific effort of sickness, the labour that was lost, wasted, stolen, and squandered as a condition of my body being here at all. To say that birth begins with labour and that labour begins with a contraction or the sudden breaking of waters or the quiet dislodgement of a mucus plug is to mark one form of labour from its own dizzying history. And this demarcation is useful as a narrative strategy since it allows there to be birth stories and birth poems, but it also troubles the temporality of birth since there was never a labour contained to the act of childbirth, nor a birth that did not index the sublime and violent history of reproduction, the almost unbelievable process through which a body becomes, if not from nowhere, then also not quite from anywhere in particular. In a birth story, there are two stages of labour, early and active. These stages have their own classifications and measurements, which of course are at odds with any experience. Active labour becomes childbirth proper as the cervix dilates from about 8 to 10 centimetres, time in which your body prepares to push. This period is known as transition. Transition is accompanied by a massive rush of adrenaline, which in turn produces a peculiar species of panic. I cannot do this, says the labouring person. I want to go home. I must have been going through transition when I begged the midwife to tell me what was happening. I had been in early labour for 3 days, in active labour for 7 hours. I was so exhausted that my body shook, even when laying down. I asked and asked. The midwife replied, "You know what is happening." I think she meant simply, you are in labour and you will give birth. You know it because you are doing it. What I heard was a more confounding assertion. You know because what you are doing is natural. Your body can and will guide you. Listen to yourself as you do something that you were made to do. But the concept of nature is hardly reassuring. There is no nature that is not also culture, no culture which is not also politics, no politics without power, and no power without injustice. Nature is a process through which things become meaningful, through which we both understand and value certain bodies and their events. Nature is not natural, wrote Gertrude Stein, and that is natural enough. Or, to put it differently, as Maya Andrea Gonzalez argues, even before the advent of class society, there was never any natural regime of human sexual reproduction. Age at marriage, length of breastfeeding, number of children born, social acceptability of infanticide, all have varied across human social formations. After the birth, I walked from one part of the hospital to another, pushing the crib and a drip in one hand and carrying a catheter bag in another. I felt for the first time the shock of having lost blood. I ate toast and peanut butter, an orange, a large tub of yogurt. Nurses and doctors drifted in and out, subjecting my body and my babies to a set of procedures that determined our health and recovery. The vocabulary of birth is fixed on normal outcomes, a kind of breezy eugenics. I considered my vagina, a part of me that had always seemed so oversignified and encumbered, an odd space, if not an outright absence. In the drama of birth, I thought of it as a fantastic little muscle, intensely social. A year later, just thinking about the inside of the body and its direct relation to an outside, about the vagina as an elastic bundle able to shape itself to the occasion, a site of massive interspecies hospitality triggers a milk letdown, sketching yet another line from the inside out, or rather, proving their indistinction. In a short text on divisions of labour, a poem by Holly Melgard, Kristen Gallagher asks, as one who participated in my own birth, have I not been in labour before? The Melgard poem is an edited alphabetical list of things said during childbirth by people captured in YouTube videos. The utterances are sounds like ah and words like motherfucker. Apparently, Melgard's performance of the poem caused a minor controversy at a reading in Philadelphia, where audience members felt that a poet who had never given birth had no right to mouth those utterances. In response, Melgard suggests in an interview that a baby's inability to remember their own birth represents a missed opportunity, the opportunity for everyone to write a birth poem, to sound their own labour pains. Gallagher's question reads both the poem and its anxious response as an opportunity to consider how the act of labour and its possible modes of participation. Who has the right, she asks, to speak of the labour of birth? How can we separate the labour of labour from the experience of birth? The division of labour refers to the breakdown of production to its constituent parts, the reduction of complex processes to small repetitive tasks designed to speed up production and to abstract the things made from those who make it. As labour is divided, says Marx, all wages shrink together. It also refers to the different ways that work has been divided by lines of gender, race, and class, the way such divisions are naturalised and enforced, and the way concepts of nature and law structure experiences of living and dying. Melgard's poem makes a play on the idea of the division of labour. By organising sounds and words into an alphabetised list, she divides a collective birth into basic units: grunts, moans, screams, swear words, questions, exclamations, beggings, pleadings, cursings, sounds of effort and ecstasy, sounds of despair. Labour so divided is a playbook for any birth, and so also for any birth poem. The word labour, in all its different variations, shares a root which denotes hardship, pain, affliction, misfortune, suffering, distress. What unites labour, therefore, is not just the effort or exertion that is required when one works on anything, birthing a baby or not, but the terror of that effort and the risk of injury or death. Every miscarriage, writes Silvia Federici, is a workplace accident. Labour divided presents another kind of hardship, that is, the fact of division itself. A worker from their body, a working body from the means of production, workers and their bodies from each other. Marx famously writes of the worker who, under capitalism, is doubly free, free to sell their own labour and free from that which would make such a sale unnecessary in the first place. As we already know, the question of production is also always a question of reproduction, how the worker is made and remade daily, and how the worker is made and remade generationally, and how the worker is made and remade structurally. This makes the word labour especially potent, since it must account not just for the activity of work, but also the potential of a body to work, and therefore that body's value in a given market. It also must account for the collaborative processes of birthing and being born, the very process of becoming a body at all. But not all workers are free to sell their labour. The history of capital is also the history of slavery, dispossession and death, a history of work that cannot be contained by the figure of the worker. In W.E.B. Du Bois's Black Reconstruction and C.L.R. James's Black Jacobins, writes Saidiya Hartman, the agency of the enslaved becomes legible as politics. At the moment, slaves are transformed into black workers and revolutionary masses fashioned along the lines of the insurgent proletariat. The problem, she continues, is that the sexual and reproductive labour on which slavery and therefore capitalism as a mode of production is predicated falls outside the account of the worker and the general strike. And so, it is not just the category of work, the figure of the worker, and the power of the strike that must expand to include the race and sexed labour easily obscured by economic theory. The history of labour itself, a history of the colony, the factory, the nation state, the city, the family, the possession, a history of agitation, rebellion, revenge, survival, hope, collectivity, a history of birth, death, and trade, a history of kinship, maternity, and lost relations must also be recognised in its fullness. And more, there is no struggle for a future, no future in which our labour is unalienated, no labouring for each other or for freedom that does not depend on the struggles already lost and won, struggles that took place at home, in bed, within the body, across the family, in the mouth, as speech, in the refusal, gestured or signed, captured by desire, in the intimate shapes of embrace, cooked and milled and fermented, folded into fabric, struggles in which the reproduction of care transformed itself against the reproduction of misery, dispossession, alienation, and extraction. If value names that which has been stolen, sold, and alienated from the body of the worker, both free and unfree, then it also names that which has been stolen back, reimagined, collectivized, and embodied. We labour towards the latter and strike against the former. Thanks so much. Thanks for sticking around that whole time. We'll bring Brooks back into the screen now, and we will be happy to take questions.
And also thanks to everyone. We are just looking at all the wonderful comments and questions and whatnot. So I don't know, jump in if you want to talk to us.
Yeah. Does anyone have any questions? Oh, hang on. We have some questions from Claire, don't we? Where did you put your computer? Maybe we can start with that, and then
I think ew. Indeed.
Thanks everyone for your very lovely comments.
And thanks again. We said this a couple of times, but thanks again to Claire for organising this, and Cuplet TV for having us. This is such a great thing to be doing in these times. So really appreciate the effort and the labour to make this happen.
And I believe this is going to be a regular thing, Thursday nights, weekly at 8 p.m. Correct me if I'm wrong, Claire. And so a wonderful thing to tune into from here on in.
Looking through the comments, did you have how's Vinny?
Vinny is great. Yeah, very good.
Vinny's killing it. Thank you. Aiden, did you have something?
Did Aiden have a question?
Yeah, two-part question.
A two-part question?
I don't know.
Where did you see that?
Up there, somewhere way up. Don't know. Anyway, Claire asks us.
I like the little argument about sack with a C or sack without it. Sack C or sack. You get what I mean. You know who you are. I don't think Aiden.
Yeah, way up. Claire asks.
He says no.
Oh, cool.
Oh, hang on, we've got one here. Why did you choose these specific works to read? Smiley face. Great question, Ray. Do you want to go first, Brooks?
Sure. I chose these because they're the things I've been working on most recently. So I thought and I haven't read them all together, so I thought nice chance to try that out, see how they hang together. Also, Corey, Vinny is great. Thanks. She's fast asleep at the moment, unfortunately, but she's heroic, really excellent. Vinny is our baby. For anyone who was kind of wondering why we keep talking about Vinny.
Hero of Labour, the poem. Ray, I'll answer your question. I read those two because Labour is a book of 3 poems, and I thought Toast for Friendship and Labour would be the best 2 to read for a 25-ish minute slot. And there's one unread, which can be a little treat for if you ever read the book. An excellent reason. That's good.
Claire asked, so I'll ask you this question from Claire. Are you writing at the moment, and if so, what?
That is a good question. Yes and no. We are writing at the moment. Oh no, we are writing at the moment. Yeah. So Andrew and I have a collaborative practice which sometimes goes by the name Snack Syndicate, and we are working on we're working on 2 exhibitions, which both include a text component and one long essay, which actually is sort of more like a book, isn't it? But we're working on an essay for the book. So yeah, we're doing dribs and drabs. I would say that things are pretty hard at the moment, and writing, we don't really have a huge amount of time to write at the moment, given the sitch, the global sitch, and the sort of division of labour inside at the house at the moment. But we're chipping away, and we're enjoying little bits and bobs of writing.
Yeah. So as Astrid said, I'm also slowly, very slowly, sort of writing and working on a project that's kind of on exhaustion, I suppose, as the kind of like underside of energy and production, with a friend, Tom Mellick, who's a beautiful writer.
That's true.
And other than that, yeah, really like very dribs and drabs at the moment. So not really like yes and no sort of things that we're thinking about and half attempting to write, but also not a lot at the moment. Some questions on the thread.
If tahini is Astrid's desert island food, what is Brooks's?
Oh my God, that's so really. I don't. Oh, it's just the.
It's only difficult.
Really
it's only difficult if you fail
indecisive
to recognise that tahini is the obvious choice, because it's a spread, it's an oil, it's a fat. You add it. It's a sauce. You can bake with it. It goes in everything.
It is very good.
You can eat it by the spoonful. It's very high in calcium and protein.
That's true. I have to think on it, Justin Wolfers. I have to keep thinking on it. I'm too indecisive to. Yeah, I mean, tahini is a great choice, and yet it somehow doesn't quite feel right for me.
But Brooks eats, like, often as a treat, toast with cream, like pouring cream on it. So
that's great.
Marmalade and cream. Audrey asks, do the works feel different for you reading them in this different context? Yeah, that's a good question. I think a little bit, because I think even though we've both read each other's work a lot, and we've often read our own work a lot, I think it's weird to read with that sort of projective, public-facing voice in your own home and lounge room. So,
but also it was very comfortable to sit on our couch and drink a wine and wear comfy pants.
So. Yeah. So different, but incredibly good, pleasing, comfortable, enjoyable, different.
Lisa asks, what are your thoughts on women who don't have children in terms of exchange and the construction of women as natural?
Oh, that's a big one. Yeah, two big questions. Women who don't have children in terms of exchange. I think what I'd say, I'm not 100% sure what you're asking there, but what I would say is that reproductive labour is obviously historically gendered, but that doesn't mean that women are the only people who have children, nor that women who don't have children experience the gendered conditions of capitalism less, just in different ways perhaps. And I think that the gendered division of labour expresses itself in a lot of different ways, not just in literal reproduction, but in all sorts of social and cultural arenas. The construction of women as natural, yes, I think a lot about that, and I think that is part of the gendered nature of reproduction and the way that women as a kind of social class have been sort of produced in a general kind of historical narrative about, sort of subjects, objects, nature, culture, the sort of like thinking, feeling, sort of all of those, I guess, oppositions that emerge from like, you know, rational, liberal Enlightenment thought and racial capitalism go to producing women as a kind of natural category. But I also think it's important to note that that happens in different ways, and it's not just a gendered construction, but also involves, you know, notions of race and class and sexuality as well. I think I'll leave it there. Audrey, what have you enjoyed reading lately? Well, I'm sure it won't surprise you that we have a two-person domestic partnership that orients itself around a Marx reading group. Family Marx reading group. But what else have we been reading? I've been reading, I can't even think. We've been reading Nick Estes, Our History is the Future,
which is an incredible,
very good book, out recently by Verso. I just read Juliana Spar's Du Bois's Telegram, which is a book about literary cultural production and its relationship to the state from the early 20th century to now. What else have we been reading? We just read Brandon Brown's new poems that were published. I can't even think where, on what website. Anyway, they're fantastic.
Folder.
I've
been reading Hazel Carby's Intimate Imperial Intimacies.
Yep, beautiful.
Which is a really
critical memoir.
Great sort of memoir about blackness in relation to the UK, particularly, and just reread the Sadie Hartman book, Wayward Lives, Beautiful Experiments, to write something on it, and that book is just, I don't know, just really blows me away. It's like one of the, just a truly incredible book.
I loved the tahini in the first reading and peanut butter in the second reading. Yes, the astute listeners will hear that we have a real breakfast spread fetish. Again, not that tahini is restricted only to a breakfast spread. Strid, can I ask about the Federici quote about every miscarriage being a workplace incident? So cool that she almost brokers this connection between traditionally separated spheres of economy through metaphor. Do you find her theory sort of poetic in that sense? And is this partly why it works so well in your poetry? Great question, Tom. I think that when she talks about that, so that kind of, I can't quite remember if it's in Wages Against Housework or Sexuality as Work. I think it's in Wages Against Housework too. But I think, like, in a sense, she, in that context where that line appears, she's not being metaphorical at all. She's talking really seriously about about domestic labour as a kind of highly unregulated, unsafe workplace, extremely ununionised, and about the kind of the grief and pain that's inherent in things like miscarriage, which as she would put it is a kind of like a workers' issue that could never in our culture be perceived as such and therefore be protected against or repaired.
I think also her point, again, like, you know, so what you're saying, like a literal one is that she would say that the kind of literal social reproduction is like part of socially necessary labour, and it's sort of unrecognised by traditional Marxists as such, but she would say like that is a flaw of their thinking.
Yeah, and I think also her kind of involvement in that sort of moment was also not just like social reproduction is work, therefore we should be considered workers, but social reproduction is work, therefore, like all workers, we should be planning towards a general strike and a seizing of the means of production.
But also, if we look back to to Lisa's comment about the kind of construction of the woman as a natural, like, I think that's partly also where Federici sort of breaks down a little bit, in that she does really follow this idea of a kind of essentialist reading of the woman and social reproduction that is like connected to that. Yeah.
Okay, we'll talk about that later. That's interesting.
Yeah, I mean that's like a
yeah. No, I'm just yeah.
Anyway, that's my reading of her on social.
Is her theory poetic? I don't necessarily know. I don't immediately that's not immediately how I relate to it, but I can see. Yeah, I don't know. Is that partly why it works so well in your poetry? I don't know. I think also it's sort of maybe just circumstantial, because she kind of makes it into Toast of Friendship as well. And I think maybe it's just circumstantial. It's like the things that float around, but maybe things that float around in the ether and that sort of come into your thinking are by nature poetic. Yeah, I don't know. Oh, it's 9:07. Do you think we should wrap it up?
I suppose so.
Well, thank you so much to all of you. And thanks again to Claire and to Couplet. Hopefully, we'll see you all sometime in the future in the flesh. Thanks so much for listening and for asking such smart and kind questions. Thank you.
Thank you. It was such a joy and a pleasure. And thanks to Claire, thanks to Cuplet, thanks to all of you. I look forward to when we can do this IRL again.
Yeah, me too. One comment. Great. Okay. Well, I think we can wrap it up. Have a good sleep, everyone, and enjoy your tahini toast in the morning. Bye.